Hello all and welcome to Sogeti's 2017 DevOps Hackathon. In our discussion today, we will be talking about the reference architecture implementation of our AWS native DevOps pipeline. Myself, I am Namrata Shah and I am the National Solutions Architect for DevOps over here with Sogeti USA. I work here as a senior manager and I have a total work experience of 15 plus years. I've also been a receiver of the MVP award from Microsoft for 2 consecutive years in C#.NET, and I've also been a virtual technology specialist in BizTalk. My email and my LinkedIn profile details are as shown on the screen. Before we deep dive into the details of our AWS native DevOps pipeline implementation, I would like to take this moment to say thank you to our Sogeti One Deliver team based out of India, especially because they helped in developing this reference implementation and also sharing it with us. So thank you very much. You did a great job. And thank you especially for sharing this reference implementation with us. So thank you. So before we go to the AWS console, I have created this slide to kind of review the key steps of this AWS native DevOps pipeline implementation. So as you see, the first step over here is basically to create an AWS code commit repository and add your application to this repository. And for this particular demo, we will use a Java-based application. The second thing after we create our AWS code commit repository would be to set up a local workspace for ourselves wherein we can make any code changes and have those changes committed. Now you can essentially use your local desktop or your laptop to kind of create your workspace, or you can create a separate VM and kind of create a complete dev environment on that VM. So essentially the easiest thing would be to create an EC2 instance, let's say a Windows-based EC2 instance, and then have these changes being done on that VM by setting up your workspace. Now, in order to set up your workspace over there, you would require to deploy tools like Eclipse, Git, source tree, basically to ensure that you are able to perform your changes and are able to even commit them to the code commit repository. The next thing is basically to create your application in AWS code build, and we will look at the details of how to go about creating your application in AWS code build as soon as we go to the AWS console. The next thing after that is essentially to use AWS Beanstalk basically to create your application and its environment. So in this pipeline, we will be using AWS Beanstalk for basically provisioning and deployment of our application. Now, AWS Beanstalk kind of helps in automating this whole provisioning and deployment process because it kind of manages provisioning the instances as well as deploying your application on those instances. Hence, instead of creating EC2 instances manually and configuring them with the right IAM role and then deploying code deploy, etc. In this case, AWS Beanstalk can help us with all of those activities. Along with that, it can also help with load balancing as well as auto scaling of the application. Now for this demo, we will only be deploying our application on a single instance, but if you want, you can go ahead and deploy your application on multiple instances, and Elastic Beanstalk or EBS can essentially help you to do load balancing or auto scaling of your application servers as well. Now after we have set up some of these initial components for our pipeline, we will be creating a pipeline using AWS code pipeline. The first step over here is basically to fetch the source code from AWS code commit, then build it using AWS code build, and then finally deploying into a beta, which is nothing but a dev/QA environment using Elastic Beanstalk. And then after our application is deployed to a beta environment, we will be performing certain UI testing using Ghost Inspector. After we have completed our UI testing using Ghost Inspector, our next step would be to deploy our application to the pre-prod environment. But before we go ahead with our deployment to the pre-prod environment, we have inserted an additional step to seek manual approval. Now, one thing I would like to highlight for this particular demo is that we have only created or used two environments. One is the beta, which is our dev/QA environment, and the other one is the pre-prod environment. If you want, as a part of your own pipeline, you can certainly segregate the QA and the dev environments and have two separate environments for that, as well as add an additional environment for prod deployment. So in essence, you would totally have about four environments, that is dev, QA, pre-prod, and prod. But just to keep the pipeline shorter and to be able to complete the deployments in a given amount of time, and also considering the cost involvement, we have kept only two environments for this particular demo, which is essentially the beta environment and the pre-prod environment. If you want, you can add additional environments, and the setup of these environments is going to be identical to our beta and our pre-prod environments. So now let's go and look at our AWS console. So this is our AWS console, and as you see, this is AWS pipeline, and the name of our pipeline is Sogeti Demo OD, and this is our AWS native pipeline that I'm currently showcasing over here. As we went through the key steps, I'm just going to review the stages over here as well to ensure that they are in sync with the key steps that we just went through. The first step, or the first stage over here, is basically fetching source code from AWS code commit, then building the source code using AWS code build, and then eventually deploying it to a beta environment using AWS Beanstalk, and then finally doing some testing using Ghost Inspector, and then seeking pre-approval before a pre-prod deployment. And again, that pre-prod deployment is going to be with Elastic Beanstalk. Now let us look at the configuration of some of the key services that are a part of this pipeline. Let us begin with AWS code commit. So let's go and review our code repository. So this is the AWS code commit console, as you can see, and we have a single repository over here, which is demo Sogeti OD. So let us quickly look into the configuration details of this particular repository. So we can click on that repository, and as you see, these are our files over here. You can see the source folder, you can see the build spec.yaml file, you can see the pom.xml, as well as if I go to the commits menu, you will be able to see that this is the master branch, and there are a bunch of commits that were made today and a few on May 4th, and a couple of them maybe earlier than that. So let's go back to our code base now, and as you see, there's a source folder over here, and if you click on the source folder, you will see there's a main and a test folder, and we have a web app, and in our web app we have fonts, images, so a JS folder, pages, and we have our index.jsp. Now essentially we will be making changes to our index.jsp and then finally checking those changes in. So this is our code repository on AWS. Now the next step, as we discussed earlier, would be to set up our local repository. So for this demo, what we have done is we have created a separate dev VM, and we have kind of configured our dev environment over here. So as you see, this is my project, my web app, which is for my AWS native DevOps pipeline. and you can see some of those folders that we just reviewed in our code commit repository. You can see source, you can see main Java web app, and the index.jsp over here. And as you see, we have our application number over here as 8.2. And then when we come back and we make certain changes, essentially what we will do is we will change this number from 8.2 to 8.3 and then check in our changes to our code repository. Okay, so this was AWS code commit. Now the next service that we will look at is AWS code build. So let's click on AWS code build. And as you see, there are a bunch of projects over here, but for this demo, we will be using demo Sogeti OD code build. So let us click on this to look at its configuration. So as you see over here, this is our project, code build project, and this is the current URL of our source. This is nothing else but the URL to our code commit git repository. And how is this build going to happen? So this build is going to happen using JDK 8 and using the build spec.yaml, which is a part of our source code folder. And after the build has been done, the artifacts would be stored in Amazon S3, and the artifact would be stored as demo Sogeti OD and under the bucket Sogeti OD. And we are using an existing service role, code build demo Sogeti OD code build service role to kind of perform this application code build. So these were the configuration settings of our code build. And as we mentioned in over here, that after every build is done, we will be storing our compiled code or our build in our S3. So let's go and look at our S3 repository over here. So this is Amazon S3, and this is my S3 repository. Hold on, sorry, I think I went to the wrong one. This is our S3 repository, and as you see, this is my folder, and this is my repo where all my builds are stored. So as you see, the last build over here was done on May 6th. That is just today, just a few minutes back at 5:10 p.m. It's currently 6:23. And our subsequent build will be stored over here as well. Okay, so the next service that we will look at is Elastic Beanstalk. Now, as you see, there are a bunch of applications over here, but our application is demo Sogeti OD. So let's select that application. And under this application, we have two environments. So as I said earlier as well, for this demo, we have only created two environments. So you see there's a pre-prod environment and there's a QA/dev/beta environment over here. And both these environments are identical to each other. There's no difference at all. So what we will do is we will review the configuration of our pre-prod environment. So let us select a pre-prod environment. Now, as you see, the health of our environment is green. That means the environment is in pretty good shape, and our build is going to come from this particular version. This particular version is currently deployed on this environment. The configuration is a 64-bit Amazon Linux version 2.5.1 running Tomcat 8 and Java 8. And let's go for the configuration details. And here, as you see, the environment type is a single instance. So although we are using single instance over here, if I edit this, you will get either with load balancing and auto scaling. But in this case, we just want to use a single instance for deployment, so we are not using load balancing or auto scaling. But if you want and you have multiple instances and you want to go about performing load balancing or auto scaling, you can certainly do that. As you see, the instance type over here is T1 micro, and the URL for this particular environment is right here on the top. So if I click on this URL, you will see that this is our application which is deployed over here, and currently our application number is 8.2. As you see, it's welcome to Sogeti 8.2. So when we make further changes, essentially what we will be doing is we will be changing this application number from 8.2 to 8.3. Now this is our pre-prod environment over here, and as I said earlier, our QA environment or a beta environment is identical to this pre-prod environment. So let's further on go ahead and look at logs. So if you go and look at logs, we do not have any logs configured. There is no special health monitoring going on, and we have some basic monitoring. As you see, for a server is 68.3% CPU utilization. This is the network bandwidth and in, and this is the network bandwidth out. There are no alarms that have been set, and we don't have any updates or updates scheduled. These are some of the events that have been executed in the past. Every time you do a deployment, it kind of just logs some of the events over here, and we do have some tags associated. As you see, we have name and then pre-prod demo Sogeti OD. So this is our pre-prod environment that we have created using Elastic Beanstalk. And this is a QA environment. As I said, these environments are 100% identical, although the URL to our QA environment is different. As you see, this states over here as QA, and the version that is deployed over here in the QA environment is also 8.2. Okay, so now let's go back to our code commit pipeline. Okay, so this is our pipeline over here, and what we will do now is we will execute this pipeline. So in order to execute the pipeline, what we will do is we will go back to our source code, and we will make a small change over here to one of our files, that is index.jsp. So what we will be changing over here is we will be changing the version number from 8.2 to 8.3 and then saving these changes. Okay, so I have code tree installed on my machine over here. So if you see, there are some uncommitted changes. So I'm going to double click on that, and this is the file that was changed. If I scroll on the right, you will see that the version number is different. It was 8.2 and now it has been changed to 8.3. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stage these changes. I'm going to stage these changes over here, and after I stage these changes, I am going to commit them. So let's go ahead and commit our changes. Change version number. So as you see, this file has been changed and we are committing our changes locally. So let's click on commit over here. Okay, so now our changes have been committed locally. As you see, our master branch, a local master branch, is one ahead of our origin. So let's have our changes pushed out to our origin as well. So here we can click on push, and then it will basically push the changes from a local master branch to our origin or a remote branch, which is again also master. So let's push these changes out. So once we push these changes, what is going to happen is that our DevOps pipeline, our DevOps AWS native DevOps pipeline will be triggered immediately. So let's have these changes pushed in here. Okay, so our changes have now been committed. So let's go back, and if you see in a little bit, as you see this is the old commit number, but since our changes have been committed, this commit number will now be refreshed in a little bit, and this source box, the source stage that you see over here, will change its color from green to blue. That's how you will recognize that this pipeline has been triggered and is currently being executed. So let's just wait for a little bit, and then this will be refreshed and our pipeline will be triggered. So as you see, the color for the source stage has changed and it is now blue. So currently it is fetching our changes that we have committed to our code commit repository. So let's just wait for a few moments, and then this stage will be completed shortly. Okay. So it's been a minute. So it should be done in a little bit now. Okay, and once this stage completes, as it is completed now, as you see, you will see a new commit number over here. So if you click on this commit, it will actually show you the change that was committed. So as you see, this is our commit message on the top, change version number, and this is our change. As you see, we've changed the version from 8.2 to 8.3. Okay, so let's go back to our pipeline, and currently our build stage is in progress, and our application changes that we just checked in are currently being built. So another thing that I'd like to point out is this details link. So you see, although this box is blue in color, you got the details link over here. That essentially means that the code build is complete. So let's click on this link. Okay, and as you see, it's kind of progressing right now. And although it's going to take a little time to refresh over here, but as you see, the build has succeeded. Okay, and it is currently just uploading our artifacts to our Amazon S3 repository, and now even that has completed. This is the build log, and now if you see, the status of this build has changed to succeeded. So let's go back to our pipeline, and shortly this will be refreshed over here, and our build code will then be deployed to our beta environment. So just let's wait for a few minutes, and this in progress will change to succeeded. It takes a little while to refresh sometimes. So as you see, it has refreshed, and our build has succeeded. So the next stage, which is deployment to our beta environment, is currently in progress. So if I go to my QA environment right now, as you see, we have 8.2 version over here, and currently it's unavailable because it's currently under deployment. But once it is deployed, that version will change from 8.2 to 8.3. So let's just wait for this deployment to complete in beta environment, and then we will refresh our page to see if our changes have been deployed. almost a minute, should not take longer. So the moment our deployment is done, we will see the details link pop up, and then we can go and refresh the page. So it takes a while to kind of refresh over here. Let me try my luck. Okay, so although it's not refreshed over there, but it will eventually. As you see, our application has been deployed in a QA/dev/beta environment, and you see the version number over here is 8.3. Okay, so as you see now, is kind of refreshed over here as well, and showing that it has succeeded. Okay, so currently the basic UI testing for our application is in progress, and we are kind of executing some basic UI tests using Ghost Inspector. So yeah, there it is. It's completed now, and we can in fact click on these details to see what was executed. So as you see, this is our test suite. It's CD demo test, and under that test suite we have one single test called as basic test 4, and the test result is passed. Okay, so till now what we have done is we made changes to our source code. We committed the changes to code commit. We got the latest version from code commit. We built the source code using code build, and we deployed it to our beta environment, and we also performed some basic UI testing on that environment. Now are the last two stages of this pipeline which are pending. So the next stage over here is the pre-prod manual approval. So right now what we have in our pre-prod environment is, if I refresh this, you will see that version 8.2 is deployed here. After I provide this approval, our latest changes, that is version 8.3, will be deployed to our pre-prod environment. So I'm just going to type approved in over here, click on approve, provide my approval to go ahead and perform deployment on the pre-prod environment. So let's just wait for a few minutes, and then you will see that the pre-prod deployment stage will be in progress. It takes a few minutes, but hopefully the deployment should be completed shortly. So let's just wait for it to refresh. Okay, it's taking a little while. Okay, there it is. So now our pre-prod deployment stage is in progress, and our latest application with version number 8.3 will be deployed to our pre-prod environment. So let's just wait for a few minutes, and then we will try and refresh our pre-prod environment URL to see if our changes have been deployed successfully or not. So it's been a minute, should be completed shortly. Okay, so let me try my luck again and try and refresh this page. As you see, we have 8.2. If this page refreshes successfully and shows us 8.3, then our application has been deployed successfully. So let's just refresh this. I'm just going to hit enter, and there you go. So yes, our application has been deployed successfully. As you see, our version number has changed from 8.2 to 8.3 in our pre-prod environment. And although this shows it's in progress, it will be completed shortly. So this was a complete execution of our AWS native DevOps pipeline. Now, since you have witnessed the entire pipeline, it would make sense to kind of go and look at the configuration details for each of these stages of our pipeline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this pipeline in an edit mode. Okay, and what we will do is now deep dive and look at the configuration settings for each of these stages. So the first stage, as we know, is the source. So let's click on this little pencil here and look at this configuration details. So as you see, the action category is source because we are fetching our latest code base from code commit. The source provider is AWS code commit, and the repository name is demo Sogeti OD. We did see this repository a few minutes back. If you would like, you can rewind the video and go back and take a look at it. But this is our repository name, and our branch that we will be building as a part of the next stage is master. And the output artifact, that is essentially nothing but the latest version of our code base, we will name it as my app. So I'll just cancel this. Okay, now let's go and look at the configuration details of our second stage, which is the build stage. So let's click on the pencil again. Okay, so as you see, the action category over here is build, and the build provider is AWS code build. Now again, we had created, if you remember, we had 3 projects, and our project name for this particular pipeline is demo Sogeti OD code build. So hence we have put in that project name over here. Now for this particular stage, we will have both input artifacts and output artifacts. Input artifact would be our source code that we have picked, that we have fetched from AWS code commit, and the output artifact would be the build application that we will build using AWS code build. Essentially, what happens over here is that the source code that we fetched from AWS code commit has been now built into an executable for deployment in the next stage, and that build executable, or let's say your deployment executable, what we are calling it as, is at my app build. So in your subsequent stages, when we go further ahead with deployment, you will see that you will use my app build over there for deployment. Okay, let's move on to the third stage, which is a beta stage, wherein we will be performing deployment using Elastic Beanstalk to our beta environment. So as you see over here, the action category is deploy, and the deployment provider is AWS Elastic Beanstalk. The application name is demo Sogeti OD, and the environment name over here is QA. As I said, we have only 2 environments, the beta environment, which is also a dev and QA. And since we are doing the deployment over here for our beta environment / dev QA environment, we have provided that environment name. Again, we had covered this earlier. We had gone through the configuration for our Elastic Beanstalk application and its environment. If you like, or if you want, you can rewind the recording and go back and take a look at it. So basically we have 2 environments, QA and pre-prod. Since this is a beta deployment, we are using our QA environment over here. And as we discussed earlier, the input artifact for this particular stage will be my app build, which was the output artifact of our code build, which is essentially nothing else but the executable that needs to be deployed. Okay. The next stage over here is the testing stage. So as you see, the action category is test, and the test provider over here is Ghost Inspector. And let me click over here on reconnect and try to connect to Ghost Inspector. So I'm just going to click on this. So as you see, this is the Ghost Inspector dashboard, and we have a bunch of test suites and tests over here. For this demo, we are using CD demo test, and under this particular test suite, we have one test which is basic test 4. So the integration between Ghost Inspector and AWS is pretty straightforward and pretty seamless. Whatever test or test suite that you want to execute as a part of the pipeline, simply select that test suite and click on integrate entire suite. Or if you want, you can even integrate a single test, but in this case we'll be integrating an entire suite. Click on this and come back, and it brings you back over here to your configuration settings box, and you will see that the test ID is reflected here. So as you see, the integration is pretty simple and extremely straightforward. Okay, so the next stage of our pipeline is securing a manual pre-approval. So for this, our action category is approval over here, and the type of approval is manual approval. Finally, we have our pre-prod deployment, and the action category over here is deploy, and our deployment provider is AWS Beanstalk, Elastic Beanstalk. Again, our application name is Demo Sogeti OD, but unlike our beta deployment, here the environment name is pre-prod Demo Sogeti OD because this is our pre-prod environment. And again, the input artifact to this is our compiled source code that we built here during our code build stage, which is my app build. Okay, so I guess this completes the walkthrough of our entire pipeline. I hope that that this demonstration and this implementation is helpful to you. If you have any questions, please post your questions on the YouTube comments. If you have any feedback, please post your feedback as well. For the hackathon, we will be having support Slack channels. So if you have any questions or concerns, please post your comment on our AWS support Slack channel as well. And we will certainly try our best to provide you timely responses. So with that, I would like to end this presentation. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. I would like to thank you for your time. Thank you and have a nice day. Bye-bye.